It's not easy watching the team or individual that you support in a particular sport doing badly. It's a little bit worse when you see the rival team or individual going on to win all the things that you think your guy or team should have won. And I think at some point it's happened to all of us over the periods that we've been watching Formula 1. For the Tifosi, they had to sit and watch Hamilton and Mercedes disappear, particularly after that Asian implosion during the 2017 season. Then there was all the stuff surrounding the alleged iffy double battery system in 2018, as well as the also alleged iffy fuel sensor, the thing that they did to shove extra fuel past the sensor when it wasn't looking. It's the F1 equivalent of the lifeguard at the pool saying, "No bombing," and then you say to your brother, "His back's turned, bomb!" I'm fairly certain that was a Russell Howard gag from Mock the Week, but my point remains. Meanwhile, Williams fans have been watching the same stuff year after year since 1997. It's fine. I'm a Walsall supporter and an England supporter. I'm used to it at this point. You know the song about football coming home? It's a song about how we know we're crap and we're going to lose, but what if? Just what if? Although with Williams, yeah, there's still a bit of work to do there, isn't there? Come on, Williams. And I know what you're thinking, but you wear McLaren gear. Yeah, I do have a soft spot for McLaren as well, particularly because of the West days and because Hakkinen and Coulthard were a very stable lineup from my childhood. I do need to get some more F1 gear. I've started collecting it, and if you need F1 gear for yourself or your tolerated ones, I have an affiliate link in the description to the F1 store, and there's usually some sort of sale on. But speaking of McLaren, Hakkinen and Coulthard, around the turn of the new millennium they had to do what the Tifosi had to do in 2017, 18 and 19. And that was watch somebody who went on to become a 7-time world champion romping off into the distance, while they were left well behind, licking their wounds. And this story kicks off at the end of the previous video, funnily enough. Last time out I looked at the Ferrari F1 2000, the car that I said ended the banter years for Ferrari, although some of you had differing opinions on when those banter years actually ended. Some said it was in 1997 when Schumacher almost won the title and Ferrari was winning more often. Some said it was 1999 when Ferrari took the Constructors, but I say it's 2000 because that's when they ended the wait for a driver's title, since it had been 21 years since they'd last won a driver's title. Ferrari had won the Constructors in 82 and 83, even if they didn't win the drivers at the same time. But your opinion may vary, and that's totally fine. So after 3 seasons where they'd come so close yet been so far, with Schumacher kicked out of the championship in 1997, his car picking up a puncture at the finale in 1998, and then Irvine being suspiciously off the pace at the showdown at Suzuka in 1999, which is somebody else's words, not mine, it came up in the comments on the last video, 2000 meanwhile was a return to the top, and the dominance was about to begin. Although for newer fans of F1, you need to remember that this period was the exception, not the norm. Ferrari had assembled a dream team, and it was a wonder they hadn't won already. After 700 plus days as world champion, Mika Hakkinen's time at the top was now over, because Schumacher had won his 3rd world championship. So over the winter, McLaren needed to knuckle down and get all the issues that they had on the previous car in 2000 that is, fixed in time for 2001. It's McLaren. They'd get it fixed, right? The MP4 15 from 2000 had been a fast car, but it had a few problems under the surface. At Australia, both McLarens had lost their engines due to a problem with the air filters breaking and messing with the pneumatic valve springs. In Brazil, Hakkinen lost oil pressure with Coulthard disqualified for illegal front wing end plates. But after that, the McLaren started finishing again and were able to get into the upper part of the finishing order. The next retirement would be at Indianapolis for Hakkinen, his Mercedes engine once again letting go, which lost him the title. Although in hindsight, the damage was done in Australia. Hakkinen also had a poor Monaco Grand Prix in 2000. He qualified 5th, but he had to pit because his brake pedal wasn't working properly because a sensor had come loose, affecting the travel. Eventually, McLaren got him going again, but he had to recover from 9th to finish 6th. He was given a reprieve when Schumacher's exhaust failed and broke the Ferrari suspension, and also capitalised on the retirements of Ralph, Trulli and Frentzen to finish 6th. But he could have been on for 2nd without that brake problem. If Hakkinen finished both the Monaco and US Grand Prix in 2nd place, he would have finished just 7 points off Schumacher come the end, instead of what happened in real life, which is 19 points behind Schumacher. So the 2000 season should have, in theory, been a lot closer. Makes you wonder if that final race in Malaysia had gone slightly differently as well, or if Hakkinen's engine and oil hadn't played up in the opening 2 rounds of the season. But that's Formula 1. F1 is just if backwards, as Murray Walker once said. But McLaren, like Ferrari, had a talented design team, so there's every possibility that the car would do well the following year. If you were a fan of McLaren at the time, you were in for more of the same through 2001, although looking at the statistics, it was going to be a lot worse. Rumours were at the time that part of the reason McLaren had lost a little bit of the outright pace in 2000 was because the FIA had taken it upon themselves to ban a material that Mercedes was using in the construction of its engines: beryllium. I've done a video on that whole thing, this being about, 3 years ago, and I watched that video again recently because... reasons. It's weird seeing that old room in that shitty flat again. I very much prefer this room. This room is an actual workspace. But either way, this engine was a cause for concern. I don't know if the engine pictured had those beryllium pistons, but it's an engine from the year 2000, so I'm using it. Mercedes/Ilmor had made the pistons for their V10 out of a beryllium aluminium alloy, and to spare you the long-winded nature of it, they could build an engine that revved to the same level as the Ferrari, but it had a longer piston stroke, so it produced more power. But the problem is, beryllium has an unwanted side effect. The dust that comes off it has been shown to be carcinogenic and toxic. Well, that's pretty much the same thing, isn't it? But one of the issues raised by Ferrari was, is this kicking out this toxic dust out of the exhaust? The FIA agreed and banned the use of beryllium on safety grounds, as well as cost grounds, although I think it was only Mercedes and Peugeot using beryllium alloys at the time. I read somewhere that Lockheed Martin will sell you this stuff. They call it lock alloy apparently, and it's like 38% beryllium and the rest aluminium. Although, if you're going to start machining it, do make sure you're wearing the appropriate safety apparatus because... dusty. Beryllium was outlawed entirely for 2001. Over the next few years the teams would look for the next magic material. McLaren meanwhile, and particularly Mercedes, were knocked back a peg or two. They had to find the same power levels without their magic engine material. But despite this, the internet claims 830 horsepower for the 2001 engine, which was more powerful than the Ferrari offering, but less than what BMW had brought with Williams. Adrian Newey, Neil Oatley, Matthew Jeffries, David North, David Nielsen, Paddy Lowe and Peter Pedromu, along with Mario Ilian at Mercedes/Ilmor, took the MP4 15 from the previous year and updated it to the MP4 16. Outwardly, the cars were very similar, with only minor updates, with Newey going for his tried and tested size zero approach, packaging everything together to get things working as efficiently, at least aerodynamically, as possible. The most notable change I can see is the nose cone. It's slightly higher than it was in 2000, and the front wing was slightly higher as well to reduce front end downforce. And I think the barge boards are bigger as well, but that's it really. But while McLaren had that speed advantage in 2000 and before, it had gone by the time 2001 rolled round. At the first round of the season in Australia, the two Ferraris were on the front row, with Hakkinen half a second off Schumacher. It was a switch from Ferrari being initially half a second off McLaren as they had been the previous 3 years. Hakkinen was in third, with Coulthard in sixth. Hakkinen had managed to get into second place at the start thanks to Barrichello making a poor getaway, and Coulthard meanwhile was pinballed around further back by Ralph and Frentzen. But on lap 25, Hakkinen lost his suspension heading into the braking zone at the 90-degree right-hander after the fast chicane, sending him well into the runoff. For the second year in a row, he was out at the first race. Going into the Malaysian Grand Prix, McLaren couldn't find any balance. Coulthard was having to drive cautiously, while Hakkinen could only muster fourth, nearly a full second off the Michael, and once again the two Ferraris locked out the front row. At the same time, Ralph had got in front of Mika, and that wasn't going to help on a circuit that was pretty hard to overtake at, even with smaller cars and V10s. Because, those are the magic bullet for F1's issues, don't you know? In a wet into dry race, the Ferraris managed to finish 1-2 because they'd found that the intermediates worked better than the full wets. McLaren had taken the full wets, and Coulthard managed to wangle his way up to fourth, while Hakkinen could only finish sixth. In Brazil, the two McLarens fared a bit better. Schumacher took his third pole of the year and Hakkinen was only 3/10 off, which was a photo finish in those days. Coulthard was fifth, but one recurring problem was going to present itself for the first time that year. F1 cars in this era didn't have anti-stall like they do now. They certainly didn't have a hybrid system powerful enough to restart the engine if it did totally conk out. Hakkinen was sat in third and had pointed his car to the left to try and have a run at Ralph and Michael into the Senna S. But as the 5 lights came on, the clutch in the McLaren bit a fraction too much and the car lurched forward, causing the McLaren to stall. The rest of the field went past as Hakkinen was stuck on the grid, and that was him done for the day. But there was a silver lining for McLaren. Coulthard had managed to win the race, ending Schumacher's run of 6 successive poles and wins. But this wouldn't be the only time that a McLaren was left stranded on the grid. While stalling was just one of those things that happened in those days, it kept happening again and again and again. Literally 3 more times that season. Coulthard was on pole for the Monaco Grand Prix and would have likely won the race, but mere seconds before the formation lap began, the engine switched off, and he had to start from the back of the grid. He would then spend 35 laps stuck behind Enrique Bernaldi's arrows, despite having a car that was seconds a lap faster, and it was a potential back-to-back Monaco win that escaped him. But it wasn't the only time it happened. It also happened in Spain, also to Coulthard, and it happened to Hakkinen in Austria. All of this was messing about with Hakkinen's head. In the off-season, his first son Hugo was born and a new Mika Hakkinen emerged. One that was fired up, eager to do well, and one person described Mika and then wife Erja as the most liked couple in the paddock. He was feeling pretty good, but in pre-season testing the car had suffered from recurring problems and they didn't complete as many miles as Ferrari did. They incurred an estimated 13 failures of some description with the car. But it's testing, so it's to be expected, right? But then again, 13 failures though. That's not good. But this is McLaren. Write them off if you must, but it's at your own risk. The suspension failure at Melbourne saw Mika have to go to the hospital for precautionary checks. Some debris had struck him in the head in the crash and he had a slight concussion, but he was otherwise fine. But Mika, in an Australian hospital again, probably didn't sit too well with him, after the last time he was in one. But McLaren was sure that the strategy that Mika was on would have got him the win, but it was still lost points. Was it 6 points lost or 10 points lost? Answers on a postcard. And while we're here, I've got 2 extra pieces of information that can add to the whole Mika's headspace thing. At Austria, he had the same problem that Coulthard did at Monaco and Spain, and Coulthard actually went on to win that race. And during the Monaco Grand Prix, he's listed as retiring the car through having a steering issue, but some reports put it down to him retiring the car simply because he didn't feel safe. While Coulthard had taken the win in Brazil, Mika had failed to finish 2 of the opening 3 races and sat 10th in the standings, on just a single point, 25 points behind Schumacher. And in the races where Coulthard had endured poor qualifying sessions, he still managed to salvage good results. He'd won the race from 5th in Brazil. He'd recovered to 5th at Monaco, although he was on pole for that race, and he also finished 5th in Barcelona after his engine died on the grid. Barcelona is where Hakkinen should have got his first win of the season, if not for some absolutely heartbreaking luck. It's made even worse when you look at the qualifying times and notice that Hakkinen was less than a 10th behind Schumacher. It looked like McLaren was back, but it all ended as it had done previously, with a mechanical breakdown. By doing longer stints than Schumacher, Hakkinen was finally in the lead of a Grand Prix, and as the laps ticked down, he just had to bring it home, and in doing so, it would have been his 4th win at the Circuit de Catalunya. Schumacher had slowed down due to a vibration and then decided to lose even more time just to make sure the car made it to the end. So when the final lap started, Hakkinen was over 40 seconds in the lead, but the television audiences were stunned to see the McLaren slowing down on the final lap. It was that bloody clutch. Again. This time caused by a hydraulic leak. Schumacher considered himself incredibly lucky to win that race and was the first to offer sympathy to Mika. After the race, Ron Dennis tried to blame driver error for Coulthard's issue. Coulthard wasn't happy about that claim, and Ron later retracted the comment when he saw the telemetry. At the same time though, senior McLaren staff were quick to say, he really should not have said that in the first place. As a result of Coulthard's issues, Schumacher went back into the lead of the championship. But in Canada, it was Coulthard's turn to retire as a result of a mechanical gremlin. His engine expired on lap 54, while Hakkinen got onto the podium for the first time that year. At the European Grand Prix at the Nürburgring that followed the Canadian Grand Prix, Hakkinen was finishing 6th, while Coulthard was 3rd. At the French Grand Prix, Hakkinen is listed as a did not start, which is probably the worst thing that can happen to you, your race being over before you've even got underway. The 2 McLarens were 3rd and 4th, not far off pole. It seemed that something was working to an extent, but Hakkinen's gearbox failed, meaning that he wouldn't start in the 3rd place he qualified in. At Silverstone, the round following Manicourt, Hakkinen bounced back and he managed to win the race, while Coulthard's suspension was broken by Trulli at the first corner, which means it's the only time a McLaren retired that year that wasn't the car's fault. At Hockenheim, which was the final time that classic layout would be used for the German Grand Prix, both of the McLarens retired, because the engines had blown up. As they came out the other side of that Grand Prix, Schumacher had 84 points. Hakkinen, meanwhile, had just 19. Mika would win his final race at Indianapolis, while Coulthard ended the final 5 races with 4 podiums. But the season had finished after the Hungarian Grand Prix, because that's where Schumacher clinched his 4th title to match Prost, and then matched Prost's record of 51 wins at the Belgian Grand Prix. Coulthard managed to get 4 podiums in 5 races, but Hakkinen's only podium of that run came with his win at Indianapolis. The retirements at Monza were an engine failure for Coulthard and a gearbox issue for McLaren. At the end of the 2001 season, Hakkinen started his sabbatical, but at the end of 2002, it became full retirement. It was a car plagued with engine issues, but it also had clutches that dumped themselves on a whim, and it was a car that would handle well at one race and then be a dog at another, with a lot of McLaren's poor qualifying performances being attributed to a lack of balance. A season that should have once again been about Hakkinen and Schumacher was reduced to being the Michael Schumacher show, with Coulthard finishing second in the standings. Although that said, Coulthard was actually quite lucky to have second because Barrichello was closing in at one point, and this being after Coulthard briefly led the championship. But McLaren was in a very unstable time. Adrian Newey, who had been at the team since 1998 and had seen Hakkinen take 2 drivers' titles and McLaren take a single constructors' title, was being tempted away from Woking to go and work for Jaguar, headed up at the time by Bobby Rahal. Newey had pretty much signed on the dotted line, but for whatever reason he decided to stay at McLaren instead. Adrian didn't travel to the Canadian Grand Prix, and it might have upset everything behind the scenes. But the car had deficiencies all over the place. McLaren didn't adapt well to the new traction control era, and that might have caused a lot of the clutch issues that they were having, because aside from Brazil, they had issues at and after the Spanish Grand Prix when that stuff was legalised. It wasn't just traction control that was legal, but launch control was legal too. Another thing to note here is that in the period between 2000 and 2001, the front wing had been raised slightly as per the regulations, and this produced the aero imbalances that McLaren was having. And there was also the Beryllium ban. This probably didn't help things either. With the Beryllium alloy pistons, Mercedes/Ilmor could produce more power with less stress. Now they had to produce an engine built with more common and legal as per the rules materials, and they struggled to get the same power without the Wonder alloy. After this, the engine manufacturers started spending big money on the next Wonder material, which led them to start using ceramics in the construction of engines instead. In all, it's thought that McLaren was down 20 horsepower on BMW and Ferrari by the end of the season. McLaren had lost out to Ferrari worse than they'd done the previous year, and for 2002 Ferrari would go on to dominate in a fashion not seen since the early 90s with Williams, or even the 1988 season that was dominated by, ironically, McLaren. At the same time, Williams was coming back forward, and their own reliability issues stopped McLaren from finishing third in the standings as opposed to second. The 102 points scored by McLaren that year might flatter them, because the string of retirements suffered by Williams that year might have made things a lot closer if Montoya and Schumacher finished more races. So it does seem strange because, well, that's an Adrian Newey car. I call Newey the cheat code because people do think that Newey is the solution to any team's issues. But sometimes the best get it wrong, and when it all adds up as well as rule changes affecting the engines, you get this. But do you remember watching the 2001 Formula 1 season? How did it make you feel watching McLaren struggle like this, and particularly Hakkinen, because it was supposed to be like round 3 or round 4 of the Schumacher-Hakkinen rivalry? Do let me know down in the comments and get a discussion going. So then, a look at the unreliable and unbalanced McLaren MP416 from 2001. A car that fell off big compared to previous seasons. If this has been a fun look through the motorsport history books, then do give the video a like so I know I've done a good job, and for more stuff like this from the channel, get subscribed and also get that bell on so you never miss out on anything else that I do around here. Massive thanks as ever go out to the rad lads over at Patreon for the continued support, and if you want to help with the picture purchasing piggy bank or otherwise keep the lights on, there'll be a link to Patreon in the description, along with links to Discord, socials, affiliates and other bits and pieces you might want or need to know. Well, the super thanks for one and done donations and memberships so you can do Patreon without doing Patreon. So until next time, I've been Millward, have a great day wherever you are, and goodbye.